If you had 8 hours to spend with a billionaire, someone has a business who does over $1 billion in sales, what would you spend your day doing with them? What would you ask about? Well, we actually recently had this experience. We got to spend time with someone who does $8 billion in sales. They have 1,000 locations. We got to spend a day and a half learning from them, asking questions. And where it went was not where you would expect.
So I know you have a burning question. You want to know, you're saying, Stephen and Chelsey, who was that billionaire that you spent time with? And we got to spend time with David Green and the Green family, who is the founder of Hobby Lobby.
Now, I'll be honest, I had never really been in a Hobby Lobby before hanging
Which I
out.
don't even think I realized. I think you told me while we were walking the halls with one other person. You're like, yeah, I've never been in Hobby Lobby.
I didn't tell him.
You didn't tell him, but you did tell me, which I had a good chuckle.
But this was arranged by a mastermind that we're in. It was super cool, kind of small group setting with David, but not just talking about business. It was not just talking about business. It was really, he wanted to share about legacy creation. He wanted to share about how they're building their business to last 1,000 generations. And this is a crazy concept because a lot of people, when they think billions, they think, oh, wow, money, like, how do I pass that down?
Mhm.
Right. But they said legacy is not what you pass down, it's what you set in motion while you're alive. And Chelsea and I haven't actually been able to totally process every single gold nugget takeaway. And so this episode is actually us just recapping some of our major takeaways that we wanted to share with you. And then we have a date night on the calendar to go even deeper and actually put some of this stuff into motion. Because there's a difference between learning and taking action. So I hope that as we're sharing this, the things that we're taking action on, that we're learning, that you would take action and impact your family as well. I don't think I could name one billionaire or $1 billion company that doesn't have a long line of people that love them and a long line of people that dislike them. And if you're in that camp with Hobby Lobby, I would just personally love to challenge you because you don't need to fully agree with the people that you can learn from in every aspect of life. I've had mentors that I don't align with 100% in all areas of my life, but I pulled gold nuggets here or there and like, ooh, I love that. I'm going to leave that. And that's okay. If you're not sure about Hobby Lobby or David Green, I would just encourage you to stick around because there still could be something that you can rally around on this episode.
So in this episode, we have a ton of notes that we're just going to share with you as we process ourselves, like some of the takeaways that we had. And I think overall, the feeling as we drove up to Hobby Lobby was one of like legacy and beauty. And like I got emotional driving up. And here's the reason. We were in these big, huge tour buses, and Oklahoma is very flat. We live in California where there's lots of mountain ranges, but when you drive up to Hobby Lobby, it almost feels like a highway. On either side of the highway are all of these buildings that represent the Hobby Lobby Corporation. So as you're driving, you see a big old huge building with a parking lot that says Hobby Lobby Loss Prevention, Hobby Lobby Marketing, and the list goes on. And on either side of this road that we were driving on were all these buildings, and those buildings represent people, and those buildings represent jobs and lives changed. And you can't build a business to that size without going through such an internal process as to what you have to become in order to be a leader of a company that big. I often even think about that with like when I think about the president of the United States, regardless of who's in office or, any, Elon Musk or somebody like that who has done incredible things. The person they have to become to get there, and the life lessons and the risk and the scariness and like we talk about overcoming mental walls all the time in Rainmakers, and the walls that a person like that has had to overcome to build something as monumentous, I hope that's a word, as Hobby Lobby. Like you just have to have respect for somebody like that. And I sensed that, and I felt that driving up, just a deep respect for what this man and of course all of his kids and kids built together for what they have built. And I think that's true for anybody who's doing something really big. You just have this deep respect, because I know for Steven and I, like, we run a pretty big company now, and we are early 30s. We started Rainmakers in our 20s, and where we've come. And I never thought I would be leading people in the way that I'm leading people. I never thought we would have, employees, that we are responsible for their salaries. We are responsible that they show up and enjoy work and create an atmosphere that people want to work and work hard for us. And just even alone in the short time, I say short time, it feels like that. Like, in Rainmakers, like who we've had to become, and Hobby Lobby and David Green is way further along for us. So I think I was just having that in the back of my mind as we're driving in to this green grassy area with these beautiful brown buildings. It's just like, wow, who David Green had to become to build this company, man.
Yeah.
I can only imagine like the character building he's gone through.
It kind of felt like Disneyland. Like, I think is the best thing I related to. Like, you kind of drive into like Disneyland, or if you've been to like Disney World in Florida, it's like an entire like city, right? And you just kind of drive and you're like, wow, this is like one family's vision that came to life, right? And like, I mean, to think of like Hobby Lobby has 45,000 employees.
Wow.
It's just like, it's just another level. And it's just inspiring, regardless if you love them or you hate them. I don't care where you're at in the spectrum. You can see the power in putting your hand to a vision and seeing it come to life. So unlike Amazon that has like thousands of warehouses all across the world, one of David's core principles is simplicity. Like, he keeps everything super simple. And so instead of having a lot of warehouses, they have one giant mega warehouse. And this thing, you walk into it, we had to be like security cleared and all that stuff. We go in, you walk in, and you get into like this basically like big hallway, and it's a giant tall ceiling. And you look left and you look right, and literally the warehouse goes as far as your eye can see. I don't think I've ever been in a building so big. And then from there, we walk into a conference center. Now we're in like a conference center, and that's like where we host this meeting with David. And then they took us on this tour. And I want to talk about this for a second, because while a lot of this day with David was focused on legacy creation, we're going to talk about that in generosity and leaving things to your kids and how you structure that. There was some pretty amazing business things that came out, and I just think it's fun to hear about. So we walk into basically another area of this warehouse, and it's basically like a model Hobby Lobby. Okay. And like, if you go into like any craft store, like, they kind of like a smell to them. It smelled exactly like that. So this is like, it feels like you're in Hobby Lobby, but you're inside of this giant warehouse, inside of a Hobby Lobby that's inside of the warehouse. And inside of the model Hobby Lobby, there is an even smaller model Hobby Lobby that's like probably 5 feet by 5 feet. And it's got like shelving and everything, like just tiny down to scale. And literally what happens is David will come in there and he'll move a shelf on the model, like a little chessboard. And then it moves in the model Hobby Lobby that's there. And then it moves in all 1,000 locations across the United States. And so they just control everything from this one place. And so they have every shelf planned out. Here's what's on every shelf. They have every product on every shelf. And on every single product, they have a tag that shows, here's the average number of units we sell per month of this item. Here's the profit margin. Here's where we buy it from. Here's the buyer, and everything they need to know about that product. I could have literally spent all day in there just looking at the products and looking at the profit margins and all the fun stuff that was in there. But it was incredible to see this system that was so simple. David could literally move a Post-it note or move a shelf, and it would happen across the board. It was so simple, yet scalable. These guys have gotten this down to where they can launch a new store in 2 weeks. They can find a location and launch a new store. And like, that only comes when you have simplicity that can scale. So that was just like a snippet into more of the business side of things, which I was geeking out on. But this whole day was really not about business. It was about legacy creation. It was about, how do you pass things down to your kids and your kids' kids and their kids' 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 kids. Okay. And that's something we're all about at the Rainmaker Family, is helping families build a business that not only profits, but has purpose, but also leaves a thriving family legacy. And so we were all about this. And it was so fun because we got to hear from David Green. We got to hear from his lawyer, whose name is Bill High. We got to hear from his son, and then the grandkids. So like generation 3, they call them. And so it's so fun hearing the different perspectives from people that weren't the founders, but were second or third in generations to come.
And while we're listening to all of this, one of the key things I want to talk about that I was like I want to pat myself on the back a little bit because I was like, yes, we already have that in place. And that is the Green family talked about a family meeting, which we've done a podcast episode. We've called it L10 Life or our family meeting. It's something I talk often about. And the Green family does this on a large
Yeah.
scale, but also encourages family. While we were doing that legacy day, they're saying how that is so important for families to do on a regular basis. And so Stephen and I, right now, we don't involve the boys in it because they are a little young, but I think that there are ways that we can involve them. But I've seen the power in my own life of having that one weekly meeting where
Mhm.
you and I get together and we talk about things, we plan things out. That's when date night gets scheduled. That's when childcare happens. That's when like launches, all of that has happened.
Yeah.
And the Green family was a reminder of why that's so awesome.
And like, it's not just about the like weekly stuff that happens, it's about the legacy stuff. So this
Mhm.
is something we do with our company, and we're going to do it with our family. Right now, when we do like family meetings every week, it's kind of just like, hey, what's happening this week?
Mhm.
But when the boys start getting involved, guess what we're going to start to do? We're going to start to talk about our values as a family, our
Mhm.
mission as a family, our vision as a family. This is what we do with our company. Here's our vision. Here's our values. Every single week with our
Mhm.
company, Rainmakers,
Yeah.
we come on a leadership meeting, we pull up our ethos, we call it, right? These are like things that we're all about in Rainmakers. And we give
Mhm.
shout outs to people on the team who are modeling those ethos. We're getting it in people's DNA, right?
Mhm.
And so one of the big takeaways I would say from this time was like the words we speak and the stories we tell are so important, right? But it's going to take repetition with kids and with your family members to really help them catch the culture of what you're building. And so it took us through an exercise to really identify values for our family, as well as a vision statement and a mission statement. And you can totally do this as well. Like, what do you want to stand for? What do you want your generations beyond you to stand for?
Mhm.
Right. And how could you integrate that or come up with some phrases around those things so that on a family meeting, you can highlight it. You can say it like, here's our motto. Like some families, they make a song and they sing it together. Some families, they make an art piece that they put up on the wall.
Mhm.
Like, what are you displaying in your home and what does it say about your family?
Hmm. Another thing in that legacy and something that you can talk about in your family meetings is this idea of legacy stories. So Bill High encouraged all of us to sit down and find 10 stories that you want to pass down to your kids, to your kids' kids. So imagine like you're gone, but your kids and your grandkids, your great grandkids are huddled around this beautiful campfire in the woods. What are the 10 stories, or what are some of the 10 stories that you want passed down to people? What are those stories that you want to leave behind that shows evidence of your family core values? And so for me, one of those stories that I wrote down that I know for sure I want passed down from generation to generation is a story we talk about often. And that was Stephen and I were in this season where we were feeling really scarce. We could even feel it in our bodies, like our shoulders getting tense, and we were letting money make all of our decisions. And we just decided we need to break the power of money over our life. And so we went to the bank and we pulled out a very scary number to us. I think it was $3,000. And we held that money in our hand. We smelled it and we said, money. We looked at it. We looked at that. It was green paper, dollar bills. And we said, money, you will not make decisions. I have power over money, and we're going to choose to be generous even when it hurts, even when it might not financially make sense. And we took all those $3,000 bills, however that was broken up, and we gave it away to people. And that day on, we broke the power of money over our lives. And Stephen and I don't want to just be people who say we believe something but never act on it. We want to be people of our word and people that when we say something, it shows in our actions. And that is a very powerful story of how we did
Yep.
that even before we had kids.
Yeah. And so one of our family values is radically generous. Like we want to be
Mhm.
radically generous. To give is to receive, and not just say we are generous, but actually do something about it. And the interesting thing, the more we talk to people in the mastermind we're in, there's a mastermind of 7, 8, 9-figure businesses and beyond. There's even I think there's one billionaire in the group.
Mhm.
Many people have a story like that. How when finances were low, they chose to basically come against that in an opposite greater spirit of generosity, and it broke this power of
Mhm.
money over them. And it gave them this generous spirit that has lived on to this day, but also create a lot of abundance in their life. So that is a family story. That's just an example. But
Mhm.
like, does your kid, do they know the stories of Bluey better than they know the stories of your family, right? Do they
Wow.
know like the history? Like when you think of like us, like we are pioneers, but like we didn't come up with that word. That word came from my family legacy. Like my parents were pioneers. My grandpa was a pioneer in different realms and different streams, or sorry, in different aspects of life. And not everyone was an entrepreneur, but we are always taking new territory and going bravely forward before anyone else and seeing the impact of that thing. That is a Diaz family thing that we're
Mm.
going to pass down, that we are pioneers, right? That sometimes you got to know before you go. You have to step into the unknown to see breakthrough, right? So we're going to tell a lot of stories around those concepts, but then always come back to like a phrase. Sometimes you
Mm.
got to go before you know, Kaizen. Sometimes you
Mhm.
got to go before you know, Ollie, right? To give is to receive. Like having these phrases that you get into the DNA of your
Mhm.
family so that when they hit situations in life, they're like, you know what? I think this is a pioneer moment. Sometimes you got to go before you know. I was wired to be a pioneer. Here we go.
Mhm.
Right. So
Yeah.
beyond money, like, yes, we're going to leave a financial legacy for generations to come. But if you can leave stories, it can have the same, if not
Mhm.
greater impact than just leaving money. And David really argued for this, that like, if you just leave your kids money, sometimes it'll destroy them. If they
Yeah.
don't have a healthy foundation, if they haven't done the
Yeah.
inner work,
So
it's just going to
good.
destroy them. And yeah, maybe the first generation is going to do fine with that, but the third generation, the fourth generation who aren't connected to the culture and the stories, if they
Mm.
just get this big inheritance, is it going to take something? Is it going to take more than it gives for
Mhm.
them? And so that was his big argument. Sometimes when you give, you take,
Mhm.
sometimes when you give a kid $1 million, right? It takes something from them. And so
Mm.
how can you empower them to actually get what they need so they can steward the thing that they're going to potentially step into?
Mhm. One other practical idea that David talked about is involving your kids in generosity. And uh, I love this idea of literally talking to your kids and throughout the year, just handing them money, whatever that amount is, and just saying, hey, Kaizen, like I have $100 here, and I want you to be thinking about who we can give this money away to this week and actually giving them the money and having them go to the stranger or whoever and giving them money. I love that idea of involving your kids in generosity. I think there's other creative ways you can do it, but how cool is that to hand somebody money, your kid money, and have them go and give that to somebody else?
Mhm.
Like, I just love that idea. And so that's something that we want
Yeah.
to implement. I don't know if it's like a monthly thing that we do with our boys or what that looks like, but it was just like a
Yeah.
really practical piece that I loved.
There's a ton of stats they shared around generosity in family and kids. I don't have them all written down, but the impact of training your kids up to be generous, and not just generous, but like systematic generosity, where it's just like part of like, hey, I do this every month. There are so many powerful benefits to this, and we're 100% going to do this with our kids. No, another thing they talked about was just to get a little nerdy on you, was donor advised funds. This
Mm.
is something we set up for our family probably 2 years ago, and anyone can go set up. Go to Fidelity or Schwab. We have ours through fidelity.com. And you can just set up a donor advised fund, or a DAF. And this is a fund, okay, that you can fund with money. And that money is designated for donations. Okay. So
Mm.
it has to, from the fund, eventually be sent to like a charity or a nonprofit, right? But you can put money in the fund. It can grow with the market like an investment. Then you can make donations out of that. And it's really cool because you can make anonymous donations. You can make it in the name of the fund. So the other benefit of this is you get tax benefits the year you put it in. So let's say you have a really great year in business. You could put a lot of money into the fund. You get the tax savings on the generosity of giving, right, to the
Mm.
fund. But then you can donate for the next 5 years out of the fund, right? And it grows with the market, which is so cool. And
Mhm.
so we have one of these things. We've been using it for a couple of years. But what he was really encouraging is bringing the whole entire family into the generosity process around something like that. Privately, me and Chelsey have made donations from the fund, just us talking about it. But like,
Mhm.
how cool would it be to involve our kids as they grow up in the family fund? Ours is called the Diaz Legacy Fund. And how cool would it be to sit around at the end of the year and go, guys, what's on your heart? Like, what do
Mhm.
you want to bring to the table to talk about as a family? What do we want to impact this year as a family? And then give to those things and just decide on the amounts together. Like, that would be so, so cool. And actually, David Green is taking this a step further. Hobby Lobby gives away 50% of their profits. So
Mm.
they have over $1 billion they're giving away. That's a full-time job of many people that
Mhm.
have to give away that money. And one of his sons has really lit up on that side of things and really has taken ownership over it. And they have a
Mhm.
whole committee that votes on things and they give money away like crazy. But even within that, they've created another fund that's a smaller fund that Gen 3 has access to. And so Gen 3 is like the grandkids. And so the grandkids get together and they get to decide on what they're giving away that to, which is so cool. And so the grandkids get to sit on the Gen 1 and Gen 2 meetings and see how they talk about things and what they decide to give money to. And then the Gen 3 get to actually model it with their own fund. And I thought that was so cool to like empower kids with the ability to be generous with something the family is creating together.
Yeah. And something I'm reminded of as we're talking through this is the Green family has been very strategic about putting in their trust almost guidelines, or I don't want to say rules because I don't like being legalistic about things, but it really is. There's a criteria of what those funds are to be given to. So I think that's really an important piece, especially if you're talking about leaving a legacy for 1,000 generations. You know, in 5 generations from now, in 10 generations from now, especially if you set up something like a donor advised fund, are there certain charities or things that you have a huge heart for that you want to make sure the Diaz name is giving money to consistently? Or are there things that you don't want your fund to be given to? So the Green family has really spelled that out. And these are just examples. The Green family didn't tell us like what they give to versus what they don't give to, but it just has to go along with like your core values. So for us personally, although we haven't spelled out our guidelines, those guidelines of what we give to have to line up with our core values. So I would just encourage you as a family, when if you just decide to set something up like this, just have things like spelled out that can be passed down so that your family legacy knows that these are the things that we give to and these are the things that we don't give to. And those can be different for every person.
Yeah. And we don't know in 500 years if that nonprofit's even going to be around, but the values can stay the same. Now, you heard Chelsey say this, but there's just something that David said very casually. A lot of people wrote this down as like a major takeaway because it was so countercultural. Someone asked the question, like, why don't we see more like billionaires who are really structuring things the way to think long game, like David and his family are thinking? And he said, the reason is most people build to sell instead of building for 1,000 generations. And this really blew my mind because most people, when you think of your business, you don't think of, let me create a 500-year business plan, right? But we were actually sitting at a table with someone who had done this exercise before, and they literally just finished creating their 500-year business plan for their family business. That was wild to us because yes, we do live in a culture where it's like build to sell, like just exit, right? Just like exit, get the quick win. But what if you build something that's going to last beyond you?
And I still think you can build a business to sell. Like a lot of our Rainmaker students right now are building an Amazon business to sell, but it's like, what can you put in place now that will outlast you even if you sold? Like, what are the things that you are doing with integrity and making it easy for the next person to take over and have clear SOP, standard operating procedures, and clear guidelines of this manufacturer and this person that you're working with? You can still think long term, even if you're going to sell.
Now, David is very radical on this, and I don't know if I'm 100% there yet, to be honest with you, but he's like, I don't even own this business. I am just a steward of this business. And actually, he had that realization in the backyard one day, and he literally signed away the business to the trust. Okay. So you create a trust, and he signed away the business to the trust. Now, managing members of the trust, which is him and 6 other people, so 7 people, right? They all control the trust. But David's a big believer in that, like, you earn what you get here at the company. Like, there'll always be a place for family here. Hey, you want to work on the company? There'll be a place for you, but you're going to earn what you put in. And he's very much like that. He's not just like having windfalls go to all the kids. If you want to earn a good income, bring a lot of value to the company. But he also applied that same thing to himself. So he makes, I forget the number, 150 or 100. He makes like a little bit over 6 figures per year. That's his like salary, right? From the business that he gets paid, and he does the same job, you know, every day. 82-year-old, he's doing the same thing, right? But he signed away ownership of the business, said, I'm just going to steward this asset. I'm going to create something that's going to go beyond me, that can be passed down for generations to generations. And if my family doesn't steward it, it'll go into the hands of someone else who will steward it and keep it going. This is a radical idea, just thinking about that concept. I don't know if I'm 100% there yet, to be honest with you, or if we are really called to do that. But this is just the way he really felt like he's going to structure the business. And his big argument was just that, like, yeah, we can bless our kids with financial abundance, but we're not just going to hand them a windfall when they're 18 years old, because that'll just destroy them.
Yeah.
So he does have strategic giving that'll happen to family members when they hit 25, 35, and 45. But he said it's a generous amount, but it's not enough that they wouldn't have to work, because
Mhm.
he really believes that there is something about work that
Mhm.
is transformational, and putting your hand to something and seeing the results of that, it is a healthy thing.
Mhm. And that's often, I mean, we've seen that with like, yeah, I don't know. You hear stories of that when someone,
Yeah.
when you're just handed something,
Oh, yeah.
you don't value it enough. You don't realize the hard
Look at the
work.
stats on lottery winners. Look at the
Mhm.
stats on professional athletes who just
Mhm.
like come into a ton of money or try to pass it on. Like a lot of it gets squandered, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
And I mean, I even saw that like growing up. This is super practical, but like I bought my first car and I worked super hard for that car. And you better believe that I like treated that car with some respect and I wanted to take care of it. And it wasn't just like, oh, get it dirty. You know what I mean? Like I learned the power of work. And I'm not saying that I don't know where we stand as far as like buying cars for our boys when they reach that age. We'll have to cross that bridge. But it's just like I learned the value of hard work. And that is definitely something I want our boys to learn, because if they're just handed something, they're not going to understand or value what it
mhm,
takes to get there. And those are skill sets that someone has to go through. And I think another thing they talked about that I really appreciate is like, of course, as a parent, you want your kids to do well and you don't want bad things to happen to them and you don't want them to
mhm,
suffer. But at the same time, like there are things that our children will have to go through, and it's heartbreaking, but like they have to go through stuff to
mhm.
like get on the other side. And you can champion and cheerlead and speak identity, but sometimes there are things that they're going to have to figure out on their own.
Yeah.
We can't what is the word when you,
Shelter them.
yeah, we can't shelter them. We can't like just, yeah, we can't shelter
Yeah,
them.
no, he said like there's, they've had kids that have come to them with, oh, I want to do this cool idea, right? And he knows they're like, man, I wouldn't do that idea. But he
Mhm.
said he'll say yes to those things because sometimes it is an amazing idea. And boom, there's another $1 billion revenue stream
Mhm.
that a family member created. One of the quotes that really stuck with me is he looked around the room. This is a high level mastermind. Right? Everyone in this room is successful in business. He said the easiest thing for people in this room to do is to make money in business. The hardest thing is your marriage and your kids, right?
Mhm.
It's like leaning into those things that really matter. Now, yes, we're called to business, we're called to big things. We're also called to steward what we have in our family. And if we build the business but destroys the family, it's not worth it. And so getting those priorities straight, it was so cool to have a business kind of meeting that was more focused on family. It was more
Mhm.
focused on how do we love the next generation, and the generations will never even get to meet, but it will be impacted because of what we did today.
Mhm.
And that was just such a powerful thing. And so overall, like this was an incredible opportunity and experience. We are taking so much out of this. We're just sharing kind of the highlights with you. Like
Mhm.
I said, Chelsey and I are going to go deep and create some systems around this so this happens. We can teach our kids that they can run this with their families in the future.
Mhm.
We can bring the whole family together to do this. But it's pretty incredible to see a family that's really living it out and hear from multiple generations speaking into it and saying, like, this thing is working.
Mhm. And I think just some closing thoughts as I'm thinking through everything that we went through as parents and as entrepreneurs who, we beat to a different tune. Like Steven and I, we always have, and we always will. Not even probably. I know that we will. And with that, it's like, what are the life lessons? What are the core values? What are the things that we want to imprint in our kids, especially as they're young? And I think if you have older kids, that's a little bit of a different conversation where you need to invite them into creating these core values. It's like, what are the stories that we want to pass down? Not only the stories, but like, what do I want to be known for? And how am I actually going to live it out? I think I was challenged in that way. It's like, again, we go back to this, like, don't just say you believe something, show it in your actions, And if I believe in generosity, if I believe in lives change, like, how am I, one, modeling that for the boys, actually showing them and taking them along with us?
Mhm.
And then two, what are those stories that I want to tell, and how do I keep telling them over and over again so that it's ingrained? And I really honor and appreciate the Green family that they have put so much emphasis on family, on healthy family and what that looks like. I think there's so many broken families and broken relationships, and it's heartbreaking. And there's all kinds of stories. And we have, mamas coming into our group that we're in really hard situations, and there's divorce and change and blended families. And I think at the heart of that, though, still fighting for family and what that looks like for you with your family and staying connected to your kids and to your family. And we have such a high value for that. And so I'm excited. I definitely was challenged in new ways, like the 1,000 generation concept. I was like, oh man, I was just thinking about like my grandkids that I hope that things get passed down to. But it's important. It's important to be in rooms and situations where you're stretched. And this was one of those moments that I was like, man, there probably will never be a very similar opportunity like this. And we didn't even say this, but like John Maxwell was actually in the room for most of the conversation. And like, that's probably not going to happen again. David Green and John Maxwell in the same room as me. Like, how cool is that? Just like two people that have been such legacy builders in different ways. So I have a lot to reflect on. I'm super grateful for the opportunity, and I'm super grateful for you to take some of the things that we've shared and apply it to your own family and see the generations get shifted today because of this episode.
That's it for the Rainmaker Family Show today. Hey, real quick before you go, if you have younger kids, I'd say like under the age of 8, we just came out with the first book in a series, kids book, that is going to give some of these mindsets to our kids. One of the ways we're passing down stories and mindsets is through books, is through like creating things that will be legacy pieces for our family. So we came out with the first kids book. It's called The Rainmaker. It's a story of two boys, Kaizen and Ollie, or Kai and Ollie, who want to do a lemonade stand. But all of a sudden, the clouds come out, it starts raining, and it ruins their plans. But they realize that every problem comes with possibilities attached. And they go around their house and they make something they call the Rainmaker Pack. They collect water, and what happens next impacts the whole neighborhood. And so it's a really powerful story of kind of shifting from I can't to how can I, right? Hitting walls in life and overcoming and turning problems into possibilities. So if that sounds like the type of book you want to have in your household, you want to be instilling those types of mindsets in your kiddos, go search The Rainmaker, How to Win When Life Gives You Rain on Amazon.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rainmaker Family Show. Hey, if you are not a part of our Rainmaker Mastermind, we have a new opportunity for you to book a one-on-one strategy call with one of our Rainmaker coaches.
If you want to get a call with them, see if it's a good fit for you to work with us to build a business that allows you to have time freedom and financial freedom, you can get that call at makeItrainmama.com/podcast. That's makeItrainmama, MOMMA.com/podcast.